The flame on the night sea. The sound of metal trembled like a gigantic moan. Then suddenly, the ground beneath Mark Thompson's feet shook violently. He snapped awake from the fatigue rising after a 14-hour shift. In an instant, the night offshore seemed torn apart by a ball of fire erupting from the heart of the rig. Heat slammed in, swallowing everything. The smell of burning oil hit his lungs, making him choke. Mark was flung onto the steel deck, his body striking down rigidly, a searing pain spreading across his chest. His ears were blocked, only the shrill wail of alarms echoing, mixed with the screams of colleagues running in panic. The whole space turned into a blazing hell. His body trembled uncontrollably as the heat closed in, his breathing ragged, his chest constricting as if being crushed. Black smoke billowed, wrapping tightly around him. In the flickering light of the flames, Mark saw the silhouette of a colleague shouting, "Mark, run!" The valve exploded. But the sound was vague, distant, as if coming from another world. He tried to lift his heavy body, but his trembling legs no longer obeyed. A second explosion ripped the night, metal flying apart. A piece of hot steel skimmed his shoulder, the smell of charred flesh making him gasp. His whole body fell straight down, his heart as if tearing apart. He opened his mouth, trying to take a breath, but his lungs were full of smoke. His trembling hand rose, as if trying to grasp air, to hold on to the life slipping away. In that moment, images of Emily and their daughter Sophie appeared in his mind. Emily with a gentle smile, tired eyes, waiting for her husband to return from long trips away from home. Little Sophie, blonde hair flying, running and calling, "Daddy, don't go." His heart ached, as if there were only a few seconds left to remember everything. A white light suddenly flashed in the midst of the sea of fire, so bright it swallowed the red flames. All the chaos fell silent. The heat vanished, the black smoke dissipated. Mark felt his body become weightless, as if just freed from a terrible burden. He turned around and was stunned, silent. On the scorched steel deck, among the flashing sparks, he himself lay motionless, his face covered in soot, his eyes tightly shut. "My God, is that me?" he muttered, but could not hear his own voice. No sound came out, only a sensation. His soul stood still in the void, looking down at the frail body gradually going limp. Beside his ear, the sound of a heart, then seeming to slow, and stop altogether. Mark looked around. The rig was still burning fiercely, colleagues still fleeing through the sea of fire, but to him, everything was like slow-motion film, distant and untouchable. Fear, panic, then despair, all rolled up into a deadly silence. And in that moment, Mark wondered, was this the end, or merely a door leading to another world? The days of dawn. Far from home. 4 weeks before that terrible night, Mark Thompson was still in Houston, Texas, in the small house where he and Emily raised their daughter, Sophie. That morning, sunlight glittered through the window panes. Birdsong mingled with Sophie's cheerful chatter in the living room. Mark sat at the kitchen table, his coffee cooling in his hand. "Daddy, can you stay home today?" Sophie looked up with her bright blue eyes, her innocent voice ringing out. That simple question felt like a knife twisting in his chest. He gently set the cup down, bent to hold his daughter in his arms, and inhaled deeply the sweet scent of her little hair. "Daddy has to work, sweetheart, but I'll be back before you know it." He tried to smile, but his voice cracked. Emily stood nearby, her long brown hair falling over her shoulders, her sad eyes watching her husband and child. She said nothing, only tightened her grip on the teacup. When Sophie ran off to get her backpack, Emily finally sighed softly. "Mark, I don't want Sophie to keep seeing you leave like this. I don't want a day to come when someone knocks on the door with bad news." Mark swallowed hard, his gaze fixed on the floor. He was the chief engineer, responsible for the pressure systems on the giant rig in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. That job paid well and provided stability, but it was also like gambling with death. "I know," Mark whispered, his voice hoarse. "But if I don't do it, how will we manage? I promise, this will be the last time before I ask to work on shore." Emily didn't answer, only wrapped her arms around him for a long time, He could feel the tremor in her body, the worry that had never eased over the years. That day, before heading to the airport, Mark bent down, hugged Sophie tightly, and kissed her forehead. "Daddy loves you, always." The words sounded more like a farewell than a promise. On the rig, life went on in a harsh, repeating rhythm. The clang of metal, the wind howling through steel corridors, the mingled smell of oil and sweat. Mark was familiar with every dark corner of this enormous structure. He was head of the engineering department, which meant every eye turned to him whenever there was a problem. "Thompson, the pressure at valve number 4 is above threshold again," a young engineer reported. Mark frowned, glancing at the blinking control panel. "I reported it to management last week. The system needs maintenance. If not, something will happen." But when reported upward, the answer remained a cold shake of the head. "Shutting production down loses millions a day. Just keep it under control for now." Mark gritted his teeth. He knew well the danger of a massive pressure system holding thousands of tons of oil and gas. One small mistake, one wrong decision. Everything could explode like a bomb in the middle of the ocean. At night, after shifts, Mark often sat on the deck, looking toward the horizon. Waves thudded beneath his feet. Sea wind whipped his face cold. In the sound of the waves, he heard Sophie's laughter, Emily's gentle kiss. Inside him rose a vague but heavy unease. One night, his longtime colleague, Jorge, sat down beside him, eyes weary. "Mark, I don't like the numbers on the panel." "Something's not right. I feel we're sitting on a powder keg." Mark was silent, his hand crushing the beer can until the aluminum dented. He looked out toward the dark night sea, only the rig's lights illuminating a small patch in the endless ocean. "I feel it too, Jorge," he sighed. "But what can we do besides wait for it to blow?" Deep down, Mark knew his words were not merely resignation. They were a premonition, an ill omen, as if death had begun to lurk around these giant steel pillars. The flame, amid the ocean. That night, the sea was not calm. Waves rose high, the wind howled through the massive steel pillars of the rig. Mark had just finished his shift, sweat still soaking his protective suit. He was about to step into the control room when a piercing sound rang out. A frantic emergency siren, relentless and tearing through the air. Red lights flashed. The control panel shook, with numbers spinning out of control. The pressure system had exceeded its limit. "Shut it down!" "Shut it down now!" Mark shouted, lunging toward the control panel. The young engineers froze, their fingers trembling on the keyboard. The safety valves gave no response. Steel pipes shuddered, the metal groaning like a beast, cornered to its end. Then it happened. A dull explosion thundered from the storage chamber deep below. The steel ground shook. The whistling wind turned into a roar. In an instant, a colossal column of fire tore through the night, shooting into the sky like a spear of flame, piercing the dark clouds. The blast hurled Mark to the ground. His ears rang, his eyes blurred with rolling black smoke. The entire rig trembled, chaos exploding, people screaming, metal snapping, fire devouring the air. Mark forced himself up, blood streaming from his forehead, clouding his sight. He rushed to pull Jorge out from the wreckage, trapped under a steel beam. Black smoke billowed thick, scorching heat seared his skin. "Go, Mark! Leave me!" Jorge gasped, eyes wild with fear. "Shut up! I'm not leaving you!" Mark gritted his teeth, gripping his friend's hand with all his strength. But before he could do anything, a second explosion erupted, even fiercer. His whole body was thrown back. The impact stabbed his chest with pain. The world spun, everything drowned in blazing orange light. Then, silence. In that moment, Mark no longer felt his body. He floated, weightless like smoke. When he opened his eyes, he saw himself, his bloodied body lying motionless amid glowing steel wreckage. Smoke and fire surrounded him, yet he was not burned. He saw his teammates scattering in panic. He heard the rescue sirens, the waves crashing against the rig's hull. But everything seemed separated, fading, drifting away. A cold void opened before him. A blinding beam of light appeared, not from the fire, but from a vast abyss, as if the sky itself had torn open, revealing a golden passage in the darkness. It wrapped around him, pulling him out of the chaos behind. In panic, he tried to turn back. He saw Jorge still trapped, saw his colleagues desperately fighting the flames, saw the entire rig sinking into a sea of fire. And then, before he could cry out, Mark was swept into that radiant expanse, where every earthly sound vanished, leaving only endless silence. Journey through the realm of light. Mark was swallowed whole by that beam of light, his body dissolving, only consciousness drifting through an endless void. There was no sense of weight, no pain. All the chaotic sounds from the rig were now only distant memories. Before him stretched an endless tunnel, spiraling with brilliant golden light. He touched the void. Particles of light shattered like stardust, falling cold against his skin. A peace enveloped him, utterly opposite to the red hell of fire he had just left. Where am I? Mark's voice trembled, echoing through the space. Suddenly, at the end of the tunnel, a figure appeared. A tall man, a familiar presence, eyes shining bright blue. Mark's heart tightened. It was his father, the man who had died when he was a boy. "Dad." His voice choked, tears welling though he no longer truly had a body. His father smiled, arms open as if to embrace him. "You've grown, Mark." "You've walked a hard path." Mark rushed forward, but as he drew near, that hand did not touch him, only passed through like a warm mist. "Dad, I missed you so much." His voice broke. "Son," his father's gaze was sorrowful but gentle, "this is not your time. You still have battles to fight, people to protect." Mark shook his head, his heart wrenching. "But I'm tired. I can't go back to that hell." "I can't." At that moment, another scene opened around him. No longer the light tunnel, but fragments of memory, like a slow-motion film. His wife's smile, his daughter's small hand gripping his finger on her first day of school, the rare warm dinners when he returned from the rig. His daughter's voice rang out, clear like a bell. "Daddy, don't leave me. Please come home." Mark screamed in despair, tears mixing with the light. He reached out, trying to grasp that image. The painful feeling returned in his chest, reminding him that his body still lay motionless in the flames out there. Another entity appeared, not his father, but a shadowy shape, as if crystallized from light. A voice sounded, neither male nor female, calm as if echoing from the cosmos. "You can stay, Mark. Here, there is no pain, no struggle, only peace. Or you can return to finish the life you began. But know this, the choice is yours, and once made, it cannot be undone." Mark's heart felt torn in two. Before him, a radiant heaven opened wide. Behind, a thin, fragile thread, as if about to snap, connected him to the dying body. He closed his eyes. The image of his daughter appeared vividly. He heard his wife whisper, her voice trembling, "Mark, come back to us." Mark opened his eyes, shouting in despair, "I choose to return. I can't leave them." Immediately, the light spiraled violently like a storm devouring him. His body was pulled back. Pain flooded every vein, every breath. The sense of peace vanished, replaced by heaviness, burning heat, and the pounding of his heart returning. And then he fell straight into darkness. Return from the brink of life and death. The sound of beep, beep echoed somewhere, small but urgent, like a needle piercing through the endless night. In the darkness, Mark struggled. Then a breath burst out, so forceful that his chest ached. He opened his eyes. The blinding white neon light struck them. A metal ceiling, the sharp sting of disinfectant, hurried footsteps. He was lying on a medical bed on the oil rig. "Mark! He's back! He's breathing!" A medic's voice rang out with joy. Mark coughed violently, each breath searing his throat. His body trembled, skin burning, but his eyes were wide open, filled with tears. He reached out weakly, grabbed the wrist of the nearest nurse, whispering, "My daughter. My wife. I saw them. I can't leave them." Tears streamed down his scorched cheeks. In the glaring light, he looked around, seeing a few surviving colleagues, their faces covered in ash and dust, their eyes exhausted but brightening when they saw him awake. "Mark, we thought we lost you," a colleague choked out. He didn't answer, only struggled to sit up, his heart pounding wildly in his chest. Jorge's image appeared, the look in his friend's eyes trapped under the steel beam before the explosion took him away. The sharp pain pierced straight into his heart. "Jorge," he whispered, his eyes blurred with tears. No one answered. Heavy silence filled the room, broken only by the steady beeping of the machines. Mark leaned back, his trembling hands covering his face. Inside him, a vast emptiness opened, mixed with grief and gratitude. He knew he had been given another chance, but the price was losses that could never be replaced. On the day he was brought back to shore, the sea wind rushed through the helicopter cabin. Mark looked down at the deep blue ocean, where the flames from the oil rig still flickered. To him, it was no longer a workplace, but a battlefield where he had died and come back to life. When he arrived home, he hugged his wife and daughter tightly, shaking like a child. His daughter whispered in his ear, "Daddy, I prayed for you every night." Mark burst into tears for the first time in years in front of his family. He whispered, "I'll never take this life for granted again." Never. From then on, Mark no longer saw work as everything. He spent more time with his family, with warm meals, small trips, evenings reading stories with his daughter. In his eyes, every ordinary moment had become a sacred gift. And every night, when he looked up at the sky, Mark always remembered Jorge, remembered his father, and remembered the light that guided him in the moment between life and death. "Life is fragile," he whispered, his eyes glistening. "And love is the only thing worth holding on to." If Mark's story touched you, share your feelings in the comments below. Have you ever experienced a moment that made you cherish life more? Don't forget to hit follow so you won't miss the next miraculous and emotional near-death stories.